Coldhearted, a novel by Mark Dennis. Monday the 19th of September.
Simon Reed heard the awful rap music as soon as he opened the door. At her hutch, Moonbeam Orinoco knew Reed wouldn't allow that noise to permeate through the room all day. All she got to herself was from when she arrived for work early, until he showed up. After that, they would be condemned to listen to lift music for the rest of the day. Reed's arrival also signaled that it was time for her to keep her head down and keep on looking busy. Reed knew what she was up to. He saw her login times and knew that she only did what she needed to, just enough to keep her head above water in the survival stakes. Her name amused him. She'd always claimed the famous South American Orinoco River was her hippie mother's inspiration for her peculiar nomenclature. He strongly suspected that it was more likely she'd been named after a womble, following some sort of acid trip. It could have been worse, he reckoned. At least it wasn't Uncle Bulgaria. Reed half nodded to Mo as he donned a pair of neoprene gloves and his lab coat and walked through to the freezer room on automatic. It was just another Monday with another pile of stuff to get done, no doubt involving a ton of savior samples. His day would end when all tasks had been completed, the only tangible reward being the adding of a few more pounds to the bank account. At 5, it was going home time and he could forget all about samples, sample management, South American rivers and Nash Pharmaceutical Solutions. The thing about operating entirely on automatic is that you don't notice the little things until it's too late, and Reed nearly went full length when his foot skidded on a broken pen on the floor. He was annoyed that it hadn't been picked up by whoever had dropped it, one of the weekend kiddies perhaps. As the door opened, air gasped into the walk-in freezer and mist formed on the observation window in the door as warm air met cold. The shelves inside had a winding mechanism that allowed them to roll along either way to maximize the space. They were all right over to the left again, despite his asking repeatedly that the freezer be left with all shelves equally accessible. Picking past the unruly mass of boxes piled inside the door, all out-of-hours deliveries with most containing human blood samples, scheduled for analysis later, Reed walked to the back of the freezer and there was Marie-Eve Legault. She was slumped uncomfortably on the floor at the back of row 6, her head lolling to her left. Her eyes were open, pale and glassy, her skin was blue-white in places, frosty, almost opaque. She was frozen, she looked dead. Reed presumed that she was. So, not just another day at the ice face after all then. The police arrived just as his coffee had been poured, pretty quick to get there, but then this was a body, possibly even a murder and not just some car break-in wanting a crime number for the insurance. Neil Martin passed them over to Reed. Clutching his cup of coffee and quickly sorting out a few formalities, he led them through to the sample management room. It was a tricky find for the uninitiated who were not used to picking their way through the maze that was the laboratories of Nash Pharmaceutical Solutions. Reed didn't know what to do. It was not a normal situation for him, so he just kept up a conversation, chattering inanely all the way up the stairs and down the slippery corridors. He didn't shut up until they got to the sample management room. The guy who Reed at first took to be the senior officer present, he seemed to be in charge, kept his replies to the conversation to a minimum, only becoming more animated when one of his colleagues called him Sarge. Then he rapidly issued a complex set of instructions. It was a bit like a scene from The Bill. Soon, some of the other officers were setting up perimeters and crime-related stuff. Reed realized he must have come across as nervous, but what could he do? He'd never had a stiff in the freezer before, so surely that was not unexpected, not incriminating. He made sure he told them that, as a general point, just so that they knew. It was when they all filed into the sample management room that it hit him. If she had been murdered, then he might well be in the frame for it. He'd seen enough TV police drama to know how it all works, but even if he got arrested and interviewed, there was no way he could sit there and chant no comment. He had nothing to fear or hide, so why would he? In no time, the corridor and sample management area was a mass of confusion. Despite the signs and the emails, Analysts had continued to arrive and they wanted their samples. They were not happy at being told go away rather brusquely by the police. Inside, the phone was also ringing constantly. The sample management text then showed up again, having been sent back by HR following complaints from Scientific. Their natural Pavlovian response on arrival at work each day was to fetch their samples, book them out and do an electronic transfer to the lab, a sort of chain of custody transferring them from us to them, and then repeat, ad nauseam, until break time. Now they were actually trying to do that process in the middle of a crime scene. It took one of the police in uniform to light up their brain cells. They could recognize the authority of that, but it was still like herding cats. It took one of the detectives shouting at them to make them get out, back to the cafeteria. At times like this you can definitely see who the blue sky thinkers are. Meanwhile Reed just stood patiently, waiting for instructions and trying to look helpful and innocent, especially innocent. It turned out that Detective Inspector Charnley was the top policeman. He'd arrived just after the main group of plainclothes officers, almost unnoticed, and then had loudly announced his arrival by telling all present who he was. The other cops all addressed him as Sir. Reed realized that the inspector had the same surname as someone he knew from school, definitely not the same bloke though. Reed had been in conference room 1 many times before. This was where they had to watch the recent compulsory musings of the company president, James Duggan, Jim, to his friends, in selected batches. Each key missive having been recorded from his ivory tower in Fuckwit, New Jersey, or wherever it was located, and then relayed to all NPS operations, worldwide. Usually they got the same old tripe. They were all great, the best, part of a big family, but there was stiff competition within the industry and they must keep striving for greathood. He actually said, greathood. Then he usually came up with some more twat-speak garbage before ending the mandatory brainwashing sessions with how great the company was and how everyone was equal. He'd almost expected Duggan to lead them all in prayer to close the meeting. Reed wondered whether he, and Mo, were being interviewed as suspects. It was hard to judge the mood, but surely a suspect would be interviewed at the station with the radiators turned up high. Reed sat back and waited until the room settled down, waited for the fun to begin. He didn't like Marie-Eve Legault at all and had never hidden his dislike. Well, except from her, obviously. He really didn't care that she was now in a box somewhere, and he had no intention of hiding anything. He hadn't done it, but he was still full of nervous excitement, nevertheless. He wondered whether that was normal, when someone you really didn't like went to meet their maker in suspicious circumstances. Reed had expected to see a tape recorder and an announcement of time, date and those present, just like on the telly, but they all just sat chatting and occasionally looked at him for a moment or two. It was not for Reed to start things rolling, so he just sat and gave them the eye back. Not in an insolent way, but in an I'm from Clifton way. They'd have come across that before, no doubt. Detective Sergeant Thompson introduced himself and asked Reed to go through the finding from the beginning once more. Leave nothing out, no matter how trivial, and don't embellish, they'd know. He told them again the sequence of events, from swiping into the company to sticking the no entry signs on the access doors. The rest they knew. He was with them at the time. Despite him being what he thought was thorough, they still pumped him for extra detail, going back to bits he'd already said and asking for further explanation or clarification, more detail. The devil, they said, is in the detail. It sounded such a cliché, but Reed couldn't help but think that the devil was actually on a slab somewhere, thawing out, before meeting the rib cutter. When they'd finished in the meeting, because that was what it had felt like, broke up, Reed caught Thompson alone. Got a minute? Thompson nodded and led Reed across the room while Reed almost whispered as he walked, it might not be relevant. Thompson said he'd prefer to decide relevance and to continue, so Reed told him that Marie-Eve Legault was rumored to be involved, romantically, with Craig Shepherd in shipping. Thompson just asked, rumored? Well, it's a bit more than a rumor. Secrets here, like anywhere I expect, are hard to keep. I heard they that had a thing but that it was finished. I don't know details and I can't even remember who told me now, possibly Mo. You know, Moonbeam Orinoco Smith, from my department. Thompson nodded, okay, and then left the room with the rest of the police, leaving Reed to make his way back to the sample management room to collect his stuff. In the central nick, the team and ancillaries all drifted into the main room for the customary close-of-play chat on the big day. The deadboard was up, with a few photos and notes. Thompson handed out the short biography of newly nicknamed Fish Finger, Marie-Eve Legault. The rest of the team and the uniforms all took time to skim through the details. Marie-Eve Legault, born Hawkesbury, Ontario. Date of birth the 31st of July, 1986. Height 5 feet 9 inches, weight 135 pounds, eyes pale blue, hair dark blonde. Distinguishing features, a scar on her right arm from a fall. Pierced ears, 2 right, 2 left. A slightly bifurcated tongue following a childhood accident. So fish finger or snake tongue, take your pick. Degree from McGill in data management. No parents, both dead, but a brother in British Columbia, he has been informed. French-Canadian. Bilingual, English and French. Identifies as Quebecois and supports separation. Worked for NPS for 8 years, with a 6-month break after 6 years, when she worked for Le Mer Bioresearch Montreal, returning to NPS after. Arrived in the UK in May as liaison and overseer of transition for technical management and systems, supposed to be here short-term, has now been here just under 3 months. Has returned to Montreal twice, 3 days home per visit. Did she have a ticket booked for return? If so, for what date? Thompson said. Marie-Eve Legault was single with no known serious current relationships in Canada. A brief chat with her friend at NPS Montreal confirmed that well before her stint in Nottingham, she was dating one Ben Arger. It is understood that they split in March sometime. We will talk to Arger, but it's low priority. Thompson carried on. She lived in Ile-Bizard, Montreal, in her own house, no mortgage. In the UK she was stopping in the Premier Inn at Wilford. Her mobile phone is currently missing, her company laptop is missing too, and we need to find both as a matter of urgency. Off the record for now, there are rumours that she had a brief fling with Craig Shepherd from shipping, to be confirmed. No known Nottingham relationships, otherwise. The word is that she was a bit of a bitch, not liked, in fact resented. As usual at this stage, the details were scant but they'd be filling in the blanks over the next day or so. If they hadn't nicked someone for it by the end of the first 24 hours, they'd be hearing about it from above. There was not a lot for the team to go on, no obvious reason why she was stuffed into a freezer to die, or maybe not to die but to be scared off. The stiff was quite young, apparently career-driven, not unattractive but as per the attached photo, a selfie from her phone, not as stunner either. Having not been around for too long, she must have been pretty quick to climb into bed with Shepherd, if she did, but he was probably just holiday entertainment. She had a decent job and was trusted to come to the UK by senior NPS management. She must have upset somebody, somewhere, though.
Intrigued? Want to know more?